Good morning.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thanking you.
We're also fine. We have just been testing also a presentation, and did you find your way well to this room?
Sorry.
Did you already test your presentation here in this tool?
Nope.
Do you want to quickly check?
Yeah, sure. I'm trying. Are you going to share my YouTube video or?
If you're here and if you can, it would be great if you can present live. This rather meant as an update, if possible.
Okay.
Backup, sorry, not an update.
I'm trying, but I don't find a.
Daniela and I, do we have to allow her to share the screen? Can she share it all?
She should be able to share the screen.
She's a speaker, so she should be able to. Ms. Hernandez, you should see a symbol that looks like a TV with a little arrow on it. That's the screen share.
Okay, I'm looking for it.
It's on the left side.
Yes, I get it. Yes. Can you see the presentation now?
Yeah, we
Yes.
can. Great.
Okay.
Perfect.
I stop now?
Yeah, that would be great. Also, Adrian, did you want to quickly check? Sorry that I didn't ask you before.
Okay, I'm going. Can you see it?
That looks good. Yes.
Does.
Yes.
Presentation mode as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Looks good. Thank you. So we're missing Lillian, right? Or is she here too?
She's here.
Lillian is here. In my list.
We want to start the session now. Keep in mind that it's the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we
Finish early.
can start. Oh. Okay, then let me start talking. Hello, everyone. Yeah, we are very happy to welcome you all here to our session, organized by Mirja, Michalscheck, by Daniela Gomez, and me. You will get a bit more detailed introduction in a minute by a video. We just made sure, due to connectivity issues, to show everything perfectly. So there was a pre-recorded video by Mirja, giving a short introduction to the session, introducing the speakers. And after sharing this video, I'm happy to guide you through the session and present each speaker again individually. Whenever you have any question, please just type it in the text we're having in the chat. We're having a look at it all the time. And yes, please feel free to ask your questions anytime. Then after the presentation, we will just read them out or communicate it as good as we can.
Daniela, ist Heinrich gerade nicht mehr da?
Hört ihr mich nicht?
Oder habe ich nur connection problems?
I believe
so
I have connection problems. I hear him very well.
Ah, okay. These are exactly the connection problems we were talking about. That's better share a video and we're safe. So yeah, good that we could demonstrate it shortly. Yes, shouldn't talk too much. Let's show you the content of the session, which is, I think, more interesting. And that's where you came for. I hope you can see it
Hello everyone. A warm welcome to the session on building resilient food systems through efficient water use. My name is Mirja, and I'm hosting the session together with Daniela and Heinrich. And I'm hosting the session together with Daniela and Heinrich. And I'm recording this video in advance since I have internet connection problems today to enable you a smooth session. So I will give a short introduction now. This is my background. I hold a degree in environmental management and water management, and I hold a PhD in agricultural systems research from Wageningen University. And since 2012, I've been working as an independent consultant, and since 2018, actually, I've been working as a coach and trainer. Since 2020, so last year, I work at the Öko Institute, which is also called Institute of Applied Ecology, as well as at Basel University and the University Hospital of Basel as a project manager. My passion really is about sustainable resource management of both natural and personal resources. And this is why I also have such a broad portfolio, and this is why I was also very interested to host this session. So why this session? Well, the three keywords are agriculture, water, and climate change. Hello, I'll give a short intro. So last year I worked at the Öko Institute, which is also called Institute of Applied Ecology, as well as at Basel University and the University Hospital of Basel as a project manager. My passion really is about sustainable resource management of both natural and personal resources. And this is why I also have such a broad portfolio, and this is why I was also very interested to host this session. So why this session? Well, the three keywords are agriculture, water, and climate change. This is my background and also climate change. This is my background and also the background of Daniela and Hein, who moderate the session today. And the main point is we need to make more efficient use of our very scarce resources. And there are many ways to do so. And this session is an opportunity and a platform to exchange experiences. And I'm happy that you're all here today. We have different speakers that look at this topic from different viewpoints and lenses. We look at agricultural production systems from Uganda and also from the region of the Eastern Nile. We look at a particular type of household in the Andean regions that are doing rainwater harvesting, or we can also look through a particular type of business lens, for example, at leachate from a landfill in Mexico. So we have fantastic speakers here today. I'm very happy that you joined and that you will share with us your knowledge. We have the moderators, Heinrich and Daniela from Hohenheim University, and we have you, the audience. And the aim of the session would really be that together with all of our contributions, we create a greater portfolio of new insights and solutions to foster greater water use efficiency towards more resilient food systems. So these are the speakers of today. We have Adrian talking about food security, rainwater harvesting in Andean cities. And we have Sahar talking about agricultural productivity and water use efficiency in the Eastern Nile. And we have Elizabeth talking about the use of leachate from landfills as a biofertilizer in Mexico. And we have Lillian talking about climate, land, food, the triple challenge and opportunities for Uganda. So before we start the first presentations, I'm going to say a few more words on the background of the session. Sustainable land and water management are two of today's greatest challenges. Climate change and a growing demand for resources respectively increase the uncertainty and the pressure on water resources and on agricultural production. The increasing water scarcity and food demand call for more efficient and resilient agricultural systems. Here, for example, you see a picture from an agroecological system in Ethiopia where rainwater is harvested in these kind of structures, making the system more resilient against drought. So I would like to mention a few concepts and tools closely related to water use efficiency, research and practice. Water productivity. you can look at water productivity at different levels. For example, at plant level with different breeds of crops, at field level with a different arrangement of crops, for example, when we talk about agricultural systems, or at regional level or even national level. And then you have different measures at the different levels. You can use land use planning and irrigation scheduling, and there are policies and incentives. And the water productivity, one of the main slogans is this more crop per drop. This is of course not all, it's also about resilience, but it's an important concept. And IWRM, Integrated Water Resource Management, is actually also what I studied as a master degree in Jordan many years ago. It basically says it's very important if you're looking for a solution to a problem to look at the whole system, because if you fix one thing, you might just create another problem. So just really have a systemic look when trying to improve a situation. And water accounting is also very important to really look at the checks and balances, like how much water do you have, what are the different uses. You may do that with rain gauges, remote sensing, and modeling. And one big database I would like to mention is the VAPOR. The VAPOR database is a comprehensive database that provides information on biomass production for food production and evapotranspiration, that is for water consumption for Africa and the Near East. And it's near real time, and it's covering the period from 1st of 2009 until today. So this is a very nice database when you look at water use efficiency. Also very important, I think, is the link to the Sustainable Development Goals. Number 6, for example, is the one that includes 6.4 on water use and scarcity. I would like to read this out to you. I think this is very relevant to our session. It says by 2030, the aim is to substantially increase water use efficiency across all sectors and ensure sustainable withdrawals and supply of fresh water to address water scarcity, and then substantially reduce the number of people suffering from water scarcity. So increasing water use efficiency is a really central aim in the SDG 6.4. And SDG 2, it says 2.4 actually is sustainable food production systems, and the aim is to by 2030 to ensure sustainable food production systems and implement resilient agricultural practices that increase productivity and production and that help maintain ecosystems, that strengthen capacity for adaptation to climate change, extreme weather, drought, flood, and other disasters, and that progressively improve land and soil quality. So our session is very much related to these two, flood and other disasters, and that progressively improve land and soil quality. So our session is very much related to these two SDGs. And with this, I would like to open the floor, briefly give the word to Hein and Daniela. Maybe you want to say something before the first presenter is starting. And I'm very much curious and looking forward to hear your contributions. Thank you very much.
We don't hear you, Hein.
But it's not really working.
No.
Let me see. Now it's working. Okay, great. Okay, yes, I think I've said my words before. Just welcome everyone. Keep it short to give more space to the presenters who really have put great effort in who prepared very good, very interesting presentations. So I would give the stage to Adrian in Ecuador for his presentation on rainwater harvesting.
Yeah, no. Well, hello to everyone. My name is Adrián Sucochañay from the Department of Water Resources and Environmental Sciences from the University of Cuenca, and I'm going to present the topic supporting food security through the use of rainwater harvesting to supply vertical hydroponic systems for Andean cities. So, during last decades, population has been increasing exponentially, and most of these people are located in urban areas. The fast growing of these urban settlements commonly occupies farming land located near the cities, and then the farming land and local production is reduced. Therefore, food production doesn't reach the whole population and becomes insufficient for a growing demand. Furthermore, climate change threatens to reduce the water availability, reducing the supply for different sectors and increasing the conflicts between them. So, one option to solve partially this problem is implementation of urban hydroponic farming. This method can be easily implemented and use a short space and a small amount of water. Furthermore, combining this system with rainforest harvesting can increase the water availability and avoid the water conflict sectors. Therefore, the objective of this study was to evaluate rainwater harvesting in the city of Cuenca, Ecuador, to supply water for hydroponic crops. For this purpose, a rainwater harvesting conception model was implemented to simulate the water storage to supply an experimental hydroponic system. The study was carried out in the city of Cuenca, Ecuador, located at the southern Ecuadorian Andes, at the 2,500 meters above sea level. The rainfall information was obtained from a rain gauge located in the center of the city for the period 2014 to 2020. Then, the rainfall information was used as input for a rainwater harvesting model. This model was designed to simulate the water storage for each time step according to the periodicity of the demand. The model was implemented in R and is in function of the precipitation input, the efficiency to recollect the water storage, and finally the water demand. Then the model was used to simulate the water availability to supply two scenarios of hydroponic crops. The first one is based in a structure to supply food for a small family. It requires 40 liters per week to produce 30 plants. And the second one was based in a small business to produce around 200 plants using 160 liters per week. The major difference between these two scenarios is the roof area used to capture the rainfall. In the first case, we have an area of 40 square meters, and in the second case, a small area of 12 square meters. The solution, these scenarios are already implemented in the city and use an Steiner nutrient solution, which allows to produce 18 different species. Finally, the rainwater harvesting was evaluated by two indexes. One efficiency index, which is the percentage of rainwater used compared to the water demand. And the second one was used the number of weeks that the demand was not completely satisfied. So, the results. In the upper part of this slide, we can observe the precipitation used as input for the two rainwater scenarios. The water storage simulation, we can observe it in the blue line, and the red line indicates the water demand used for each case. It's necessary to notice that the demand was not completely satisfied when the water storage is under the red line. So for the first case located in the upper part, we got an efficiency of 99%. This water can produce around 240 plants per year. In the second case, we got an efficiency of 76%, and can allow us to produce around 1,400 plants. The lower efficiency in this case is mainly due to the small roof area used to capture the rainfall, as we can notice in the figure of scenario 2. Additionally, as we can notice, without taking into account the rainfall, the rainfall input, the model is mainly controlled by the roof area, the water demand, and the water storage. So with these variables, we build some efficiency curves for the design of this system, of this combination of systems. So in this figure, we can observe in the y-axis the water demand, and in the x-axis the maximum volume storage. And the efficiency of the system is represented by colors under the curves. Additionally, we can observe two red lines located in the upper part of the graph, which indicates the water demand from scenarios 1 and 2. As we can notice, the water demand from these scenarios can be easily satisfied just using around a maximum storage of 300 liters. Additionally, if we increase the roof area to 80 square meters, which is the average roof area for the city of Cuenca, Ecuador, we can increase greatly the amount of water that we can use to supply for the systems. For example, for a water demand of around 600 liters per week, we can get an efficiency over 90% using a maximum storage of 2,500 liters. So the good results of the combination of these techniques can give us some good practical implications. For example, this combination mainly depends on local rainfall, therefore can be used in places without fertile soils. It uses cheap and good quality water. It enhances local production and reduces the carbon footprint. Local production was very important for Andean cities during the last COVID lockdown. The system used less water and produced good quality food compared to traditional crops. The combining of all these benefits can contribute directly to achieve the SDG 2, 6, and 11. So in conclusion, these techniques are a reliable option to implement in urban areas, helping to produce sustainable food. However, the system can be still improved by studying other aspects. For example, it can be complemented by adding renewable energy, which can complete the nexus water, food, and energy. We need to study the residual nutrient solution to use it in another activities to complete a circular system. Additionally, we need to study the nutritional food to be sure that we are producing good quality food. And finally, we need to study the social and economic impacts of these systems in the implementation on urban settlements. So that's the end of my presentation, and thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian, for this very interesting presentation. Yes, we already have a first question in the chat. I think
Okay.
I will just read it out loud for you, for everyone again.
Okay.
And after this, I start with the next questions from Mirja. So it's being discussed already in the chat. That's quite nice. So the first question is from Erika, and she wants to know if you consider the materials in which are made of the roof. No, in which are made the roof. Yes, do you consider the materials in which are made the roof? Any specific limitations regarding with quality water?
Yeah, commonly we implement this the material component in the efficiency to recollect the water in the model. So it uses like a parameter in the model which represents the efficiency of the loss of water to the introduction for the water storage. And then the water quality will depend greatly in the area of the city. Commonly, for example, in the urban center, we need to study the water quality in the tank where the water is stored. However, we don't think that it's going to be so bad quality, because commonly with the first rainfall, you clean all this dust, and then you can use it. And commonly this dust is going to be in the lower part of the tank, and then you can use it just the good water for in this case. And that's all, I think so.
Okay, thank you. We also got a compliment first from Mirja. So also, it's a very nice presentation. And yeah, she has also a few questions. So the first deals with the potential, or which potential you see for scaling up these systems.
Well, I think that the major difficulty to scaling up is the residual solution. But it has the great potential to be used in another agricultural activities. So this is why we need to study which is the concentration of these nutrients and micronutrients to then use it in for example, for just the garden, the garden of the same house, or then use it for directly to the agriculture in another areas.
Okay, then just a follow-up to this. Who would set up and run these systems?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you well.
The people to set up and run it. And maybe I add what I was interested in, how much are people willing to, urban people are willing to grow their own?
Yeah. Well, actually, we at the beginning, we thought that it was going to be more difficult, but with the example of the production of maybe just see the plants growing, the people are very emotional with this part, and they like it, and then it's going to getting bigger and bigger. And additionally, we got an experience maybe with the introduction of this system, for example, in schools for the education actually, and also was a very good practice in this case, and very good experience, because it was very, very emotional for the kids, and was very well received.
Then let me scroll up again, and the chat is being quite active. It's good. How easy do you think are those systems to build? And yeah, how to deal with a nutrient solution for the plants, or fertilizer, or whatever?
Well, the structure actually is very easy to implement. Because the major because most of the fields, the houses are already have the implementation of these canals. So the recollection of water, we just need to find the place to put the water tank, and then the hydroponic system is a very easily structure with plastic, and you can get one of a small structure. And then, for example, for a business, it's going to be more complicated, but also it don't requires a lot of expertise in this case. Okay. And the nutrients, sorry, I don't hear you the second part.
How about the nutrient solution? So how do you fertilize or nourish the plants?
Mostly with high inorganic salts and commonly used nitratus and phosphatus. So that's basically the nutrition and the combination of this Steiner formula.
Okay, unfortunately, we are already running out of time. Okay. So I still have 3 more questions. So I will try to summarize them very fast, and would ask you for also a very quick answer. So the first one, how sustainable can this be in lower altitudes, maybe with less rainfall?
Yeah, well, that's why we need to evaluate first the water availability with the model, with this small model, because it's mainly dependent in the rainfall. So we got an experience, for example, in like a desert part in Ecuador, where the crops were very good, but we need to get a bigger tank to supply water in the summer. But we are still studying this, but that's why we are creating these scenarios with the model, and then knows if it is possible to produce rainwater harvesting.
Okay, then we have one more question. Also, quick one. Have you estimated the rainfall harvesting efficiency for your study region? And what are the factors affecting the water harvesting potential?
Well, we are still recollecting more information from another urban centers, and then we plan to use it as different inputs for the model and try to create a threshold and confidence level of this variation of the rainwater availability, and then to produce this efficiency with a certain uncertainty. And the second one was the
second one was which are the factors that affect the water harvesting potential?
The rainwater harvesting. Well, I think that mostly will depend on the water demand, because according to the periodicity, I think that it's a good example for the hydroponic crops because they need a weekly demand. However, if you are going to use it for another activities that in a daily scale, it's going to be more difficult for the fast use of this water.
Okay, the last question, even shorter and short answer again. Again, thanks for the interesting presentation. The model would fit very well to the urban area. How do you think it can be transferred? Can it be transferred to rural areas? And also important, how much does it cost?
Well, I'm going to start with the cost. So it's the hydroponic system is around 40 for the scenario one, the small one is around $40 to $45. It's around $1.50 per plant, and then the rainwater harvesting is around another $40 to $50 because the materials could be used plastics, so it's very cheap. And then the transferability to rural areas. So we can use any area to recollect the water. So it can be implemented like on small roof areas with any material, and it can be recollected. So it's not so difficult, but in rural areas, I think that the major limitation will be the water demand, because if they want to use it for a bigger scale, they are not going to have this potential. However, it can be used for like the small family, like just for the supply food for the center of the family.
Okay, thanks, Adrian. If anyone has a further question, then just contact him with all our matchmaking, networking tools that we have. You can write directly to every participant through the whole conference. And then I would like to hand over the floor to Sahar. Yes, I'm happy to welcome you again to our session with a recently published research from the Science of the Total Environment. Yes, happy to having you here, Sahar.
Thank you very much, Heinrich. Thanks for Daniela also and Mirja for hosting the session. And thanks for everyone for attending the session and being interested in the research. So today we want to discuss about the potential of agricultural productivity and water use efficiency, taking the Eastern Nile as a case study. It's important to mention that this work is done jointly by myself, but also my colleague, Dr. Mohammed Khalifa from the IT team. So in general, the main two global challenges we are facing right now are the population growth, but the climate change as well. In this particular research, we are looking at the Eastern Nile basin, so Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan. This adds additional two main challenges in the basin, so underperforming agricultural systems and transboundary conflict over the Nile. To understand how important is the agriculture in the three countries, we can look at the agricultural water withdrawals always above 80% throughout the basin of the three countries. Also, the per capita share at the moment in 2020 is described as stressed in Ethiopia and Sudan and as very scarce in Egypt. And by 2050, the three countries are facing an absolute scarcity situation. So here we would like to answer the question, which is the optimal development pathway in agriculture that should be followed in the three countries in terms of sustaining the crop production minimizing the water and land use. And we hypothesize here that an intensification pathway is more feasible than expanding the land and following the extensification pathway. So we set out 3 different objectives, firstly, but connected. Firstly, we want to analyze the cropland performance in the 3 countries. So the water budgets, the incoming and outgoing water budgets, the biomass produced, the water use efficiency, and crop water productivity. Secondly, we want to assess the potentials. What can we save from water and land use? Third one is to provide a future scenario, an outlook about the amount of water we need by 2050 of water and land to sustain the crop production in the 3 countries. Why are we doing this study? Why it's so important? Firstly, this is a very conflicted region, and this kind of study is missing. So this is the first study to address this kind of questions. Also, again, like Adrian mentioned, the idea of realizing a set of several sustainable development goals within the basin simultaneously. Then comes that we want to enable the decision makers in the 3 countries to define themselves their optimal development pathway from what we provide or what we estimated. Last but not least, any other region that is facing the same question can use the same methods and data we used in this study. We started by collecting some data, totally open source data sets regarding the population forecasts by 2050, agricultural statistics, and etc. Also, we built the future scenario estimating the crop demand by 2050 and the associated water and land demand as well. Then we developed the scenarios using different variables. One extensification scenario, we call it horizontal, and 3 intensification or vertical scenarios. And eventually we identify the potential savings and provide recommendations. But this Eastern Nile Basin is described as a very scarce, data scarce region. How can we go forward there? We relied on satellite images, FAO statistics, and literature. From the satellite, we were able to monitor the performance of croplands. So like the evapotranspiration, precipitation, biomass production, and the land cover change. From the FAO, we looked at the grain yield and the harvested area, and of course, estimated also the yield. So how much we can produce from an area of land. From the literature, we extracted the potential yield. This is through experiments or modeled yield, the maximum we can realize, and the water footprint for different crops. We studied 25 crops in Egypt, 24 in Ethiopia, and 14 in Sudan. This represents almost 90% of all cultivated crops in the 3 countries. So how did we establish the analysis? We started by estimating the biomass and the evapotranspiration from the satellite, and from there we were able to calculate the water use efficiency, so biomass or primary productivity divided by the evapotranspiration. And similarly, we estimated the crop water productivity by dividing the grain yield from FAO by the evapotranspiration, which is the water consumption. Here we can say that we analyzed the spatiotemporal performance of croplands. We did that for 16 years, and we created time series for the different parameters. Then we used these 2 parameters that we just calculated and analyzed them. So we estimated the coefficient of variation, which describe how stable is a time series. And we use the values for the coefficient of variations as proxies for the improvements we can actually realize in the water footprint. Next, we looked at the yield from the literature in FAO by defining the actual and the potential yield for different crops. And from there, we calculated the yield gap, and it shows different percentiles and assumes that we can achieve these or close these yield gaps in the different vertical scenarios. Last thing that we calculated the per capita supply for the population over the last 25 years, and assumed that to remain constant until 2050. So we have 3 different time series for population forecasts in the low and medium and high fertility variants. And we calculated the demand of crops and associated water and lands for these different variants until 2050. So you can see now we have 4 different scenarios: a horizontal scenario, business as usual; 3 vertical scenarios have different variables implying different improvements in these variables. Eventually, we calculated the water and land demand for each country, for each scenario, and for each variant as well, and compared it to the available water and land resources, and this is pretty much our objective number 3. The results if we remember, the first objective is looking at the water use efficiency and crop water productivity. And there you can see, for example, that Egypt has the highest crop water productivity and Ethiopia has the highest water use efficiency. It's very interesting to find Ethiopia having the highest water use efficiency and still having a low crop water productivity. And this can be attributed to that croplands are being cultivated next to natural vegetation, which might have higher carbon assimilation potential, and but still the yield is quite low. Of course, when you look at Sudan, you find that both the water use efficiency and the crop water productivity are relatively low compared to the other two countries. Then the second objective is about to define the potential of improvements in the water footprint. So we analyze the coefficient of variation for water use efficiency and crop water productivity. Here you can see, for example, in Egypt, we assume that we can realize between 5 or 4.4 and 10% improvements in the water footprint. In Sudan, between 13 and 29, in Ethiopia, between 4 and 25. Just for consistency reasons, we provided 3 different improvements for the 3 countries, which is 10, 20, 30% improvements in the water footprint, which is very ambitious, especially in the case in Egypt, but providing this can enable the decision makers to understand what kind of measures we need to realize these pathways or efficient pathways. So the second objective about the yield gap, we defined 2 different percentiles, so 50 and 75%. So we have the yield gap, we estimated it, and decided, okay, in the 50%, we are closing 50% of this yield gap. And in Egypt, for example, this yields in 10% extra yield than what we have right now. Percentile 75 enables 15%. So we have, for example, in Egypt, between 10 and 50% can be achieved higher than what we have right now. In Sudan, you can see it's really big. We can achieve 50% to 100% extra than the actual yield we have right now. In Ethiopia, it's between 30 and 60. So these different percentages were the variables of the different scenarios. So looking at what we need, how much water we need by 2050 in the 3 countries. You see now this dotted or dashed black line represents the available water resources in each country. And the different, for the different scenarios, you see that we require, for example, in Egypt, in all scenarios, mostly Egypt is going to suffer and struggle to secure enough water for crop production. Same is actually, or not exactly same, Sudan is in a better situation in Egypt with that, but the horizontal scenario in the 3 countries, so business as usual, is not any more feasible. We cannot arrive by 2050 and have enough resources for that. So Sudan has to follow one of the vertical or intensification pathways, and Ethiopia also has the opportunity to produce enough with the water it has in the vertical 2 and vertical 3. The land is not exactly different. You look at Egypt also, the available or the currently cultivated lands is almost half of what is required by 2050, which is a big trouble and challenge for Egyptian decision makers. Looking at Sudan, you find that 2 scenarios are secured in terms of land availability and 2 others are not, which is the same case as well with Ethiopia. This means that these 2 countries also need to consider the high efficient pathways of vertical 2 and vertical 3. So we had some national recommendations for the 3 countries. Looking at Egypt, for example, we advised to increase more the imported crops, invest more in non-conventional water resources, so desalination and treatment of water, and integrated water energy food nexus like agrivoltaics. In Sudan and Ethiopia, in both countries, we advise to establish or promote more rainwater management or harvesting techniques and soil conservation, and promoting also supplemental irrigation. And in the irrigation schemes in the 2 countries, we need to improve the irrigation efficiency and the farmers' financial status to promote or adopt new technologies and better field management on the field scale. On the transboundary level, maybe some of you know already, the 3 countries have been in conflict since 10 years now. Why? Because there is a new project of Ethiopia, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, started in 2011, and since then they are negotiating, but they are being in conflict. Why? It's because the 3 countries are actually negotiating over the resource sharing. Who gets what kind or what amount of water? And we advise, or we think loudly with these countries, that we need to think more about benefit sharing. So sharing the benefit of the same resource instead of negotiating over the resource. How can we do that? We say that the three countries need to identify their potential advantages or competences. Looking at Egypt, for example, you find that there's a very high experience and advanced technology in irrigated agriculture. And if we can apply this technology and experience in the other two countries, we can increase the productivity of the whole basin or the whole country. And also there is the power of the investment. So Egypt is relatively a rich country and can invest in irrigated projects in the two other countries. Looking at Sudan, Sudan has the largest reserve of arable lands within the three countries. So it can serve as a very good resource for land for cultivating for the three countries together. Ethiopia has the advantage of hydropower, but also the livestock production, which can afford or act as affordable source for energy and meat products for the other two countries. How to go forward or to apply this framework, we need to consider an assessment based on the yield gap, water footprint, and favorable trade agreements within the three countries. We also advise to have a network for data monitoring, quality, accessibility, and sharing within the three countries. Last but not least, an atmosphere of the goodwill between the three countries is required to achieve win-win solutions. If you really want to know more findings about our paper or our study, please refer to this very recently published studies only 5 days ago. I will write also the link in the chat by which you can access the article for free. Thank you very much. Please, your questions are very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Saher, for the very nice presentation. I also got the first comment or the first, two props for your presentations. I also thought it was very clear, very good. From my side, unfortunately, you answered all the questions I had always with the following slide. So I wrote something down, and but maybe I start with one short one. It's not really the scientific one, more about on the implementation. What would you think? How is it possible to communicate your findings and your suggestions, which are so important for these three countries? So how is it possible to reach out to the leaders or to the governments, especially in times of conflicts? Yes.
Yeah, actually, I try to reach out. So myself and my colleague Mohammed, we are trying to communicate with the negotiation teams and the policymakers within the three countries to inform them with the findings. One good point, I wish, like, if I have the chance to talk to the leaders of the three countries, I would say that, anyways, we are looking now at 2050, and it seems that the three countries can barely survive in one or two scenarios. What about 2100? Even beyond. So sharing resources is not only a recommendation, it might be a must actually in the future. But filling this gap between what we find scientifically in our study and what decision makers would decide on, this is something that is a bit out of control. We have this gap between us recommending and them doing, of course. But that would be, of course, great if scientific findings are considered in negotiations and future planning.
Yes, I have to say mention one more. We have, of course, some compliments on the chat. You can read them also later if you want. Maybe one is a bit remarkable. So thanks for, I hope I pronounce it at least half correct, Ramanathan. He's joining us from Brisbane, being awake at this time now, and also enjoyed your presentation, although he must be very tired now. So yeah, also a compliment I want to pass to you. Then I have one more question. Can you tell a bit about agrivoltaic systems?
In fact, agrivoltaic system, we are talking about a bit of smaller scale. So it's more how can you optimize a system that uses, for example, the solar energy to transfer that to pump water from the groundwater with, and then use it for irrigation. So it's integrated solutions that would minimize the use of land and water at the same time. Also, this can be done by desalinating the seawater through seawater greenhouses, for example. Of course, now we recommend that, but actually there should be someone following up with the economic aspect of this, because these kind of technologies are rather expensive. And again, they are not sufficient to produce for a large part of the population, but maybe only for specific areas and towns. It's also not exactly my area of expertise, I have to say. I like to look more at the larger scale assessments. But of course, applying different small solutions in a larger scale can contribute to the overall outcome.
Okay, I have one final question from Mirja. It's about the recommendations to Egypt to import more food crops, as Egypt is already the largest wheat importer of the world. It would just increase the dependencies of Egypt. So, what do you think about this?
I totally agree with Mirja with that. It's problematic because already like more than 50% of the wheat in Egypt is being imported. Not only the wheat, actually, other crops as well. But we at the moment are discussing what can we expect by 2050. So like, there should be some management, or the decision makers in Egypt would think that, okay, we are going to face this situation in 2050. What can we do? One of the solutions is to allocate more investments for even increasing the imports, even though they are the largest importer for wheat actually worldwide, as Mirja says. But sometimes we just can't have so many different solutions. As the optimal solution, I would say, is that they would invest more in irrigated agriculture in Sudan and Ethiopia, where the productivity is so low and there is no enough investment for that. So instead of importing, maybe cultivating elsewhere. I'm not talking about land grabbing. I'm talking about integrating and cooperation. That on the other hand, the very high productivity would fill the food security or the food gap in the other two countries as well.
Yeah, thank you. You already got the compliment or confirmation that it's a nice idea, and also some input for further studies, including nutritional security analysis. So I suggest just read the comment on the text in the chat. And I would, thank you also for your very interesting presentation.
Thank you very much.
And hopefully see you next time at WSCC. And then I'd like to open the floor to Elizabeth on the to Mexico study on recycling water using leachate. So please, Elizabeth.
Yeah, sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elizabeth from Mexico, and today I present you the proposal use of the leachate produced in a landfill in Veracruz, Mexico, as a liquid biofertilizer. According to the World Bank, the world generates around 2 billion tons of municipal solid waste each year, and more than 30% are not properly collected or disposed. Furthermore, 70% of cities use open dumps and landfills as final disposal sites. One of the disadvantages of these landfills is that they produce leachates that are characterized by high organic and inorganic pollutant concentrations. For that reason, it is necessary to treat leachates in order to mitigate their environmental impacts on soil and water. On the other hand, as stated by the Food Agriculture Organization in 2017, agriculture is the largest water user worldwide, accounting for 70% of total freshwater withdrawals on average. Agriculture is also a major source of water pollution from nutrients, pesticides, and other contaminants, which, if unmanaged, can lead to significant social, economic, and environmental costs. Improving agricultural productivity while conserving and enhancing natural resources such as water is an essential requirement for farmers to increase global food supplies on a sustainable basis. This proposal consists of treating leachate produced in Martínez de la Torre, a small city in Veracruz, Mexico, with the objective of using it as a liquid biofertilizer, giving added value to something that was previously a hazardous waste. And this initiative contributes to the circular economy as it integrates waste into a new value chain and could also increase food production. The leachate will be treated in 3 different ways. The first one is the storage in environmental conditions. The second one is an anaerobic reactor, and the third one is adsorption in charcoal. And in order to determine the best treatment of the leachate, the liquid will be applied in a tomato crop, in a tomato experimental crop, and the effect of the 3 different treatments will be measured. The parameters to be evaluated are stem length, number of leaves, and also number of lateral branches. To compare the performance of the liquid biofertilizer, plants of control were irrigated with water, with a commercial fertilizer, and also with a worm leachate. So far, we have just carried out a pilot test with the leachate treated by storaging. Experimental units were established and 5 plants were irrigated with a landfill leachate, 5 with a commercial fertilizer, 5 with a worm leachate, and 5 more with drinking water as a control. After 4 weeks of irrigation, the best results were obtained with worm leachate and water controls, while landfill leachate didn't show the expected results, as you can see in this table. And as a conclusion, a very previous conclusion, results were not so favorable. They didn't expect they didn't show what we expected. And for future work, we have to work in the characterization of the landfill leachate and worm leachate. We also should consider 2 more different processes for leachate. Those are anaerobic reaction and adsorption in charcoal. And the new experimental design should also include different concentrations of the landfill leachate dilutions. That's all. Thank you. And if is there any question?
Okay, thank you also, Elizabeth, for your interesting talk. Yes, so do we have any question? Let me, I think it is more difficult on the short presentation because people have to write it in the chat, and for the others, they had 10 minutes. We have the first question from Ajay Singh. If not treated properly, the leachate may cause severe health and environmental hazard. Have you considered its quality criteria?
Yes, as I said, so far we've just carried out a pilot test, but we still have a lot of work to do. We have to do the characterization of the leachate without treatment, and then we have to characterize the leachate treated by storaging, leachate by anaerobic reactor treatment, and finally with absorption in charcoal. We have found that the leachate adsorbed in charcoal could eliminate some pathogens, and maybe this could be the best quality leachate for the use we are looking for, that is a liquid biofertilizer. Yes, we have considered it, but we know that we still have to do a lot of work with this research.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, if we have no more questions, then thanks also for the very interesting presentation. Yes, my question or suggestion or whatever was also about. I will have to Google this word because okay, this is too complicated in English. I will explain it shortly. Do you have any experience in some specific water plants to clear the water or clear the leach to get it to a higher quality?
Yes.
Okay. I have one more comment from Ajay Singh again. That the presentation was short. Mirja already answered him. It was a short presentation because the format, as it's very limited time, we have like 2 oral presentations and 2 poster presentations, but a poster itself doesn't make sense on the small screen, so it's very nice to have a short, precise, on the point presentation as you did. So thanks again. And then last but not least, I would like to hand over to Lillian to Uganda and the triple challenge of climate, land, and food. I see Lillian is here. Yes, now you appear on the screen.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, sorry. Does anyone hear me?
Yes, we should hear you loud and clear.
Okay, so, oh, cool. So may I ask Mirja to help me with the presentation? I already sent it to her. Okay. So thank you again. My name is Lillian, and I am pleased to present to you this research or the research findings that we did together with 2 senior professors, 2 senior researchers, one that Saher has already talked about, Dr. Mohammed Khalifa, and Professor Laz Ribe from the ITT, that's the Institute for Technology and Resources Management in the tropics and subtropics. And I am a junior researcher. I just recently completed my master's degree, and this is one of the projects that I worked on. So majorly, I'll be talking about what challenges and opportunities a country like Uganda, whose backbone is agriculture, can have as its population grows and as people expand land to grow more food. So it's usually assumed that as populations increase, then people should grow more food so they provide enough food for people. But we will see later on that maybe or maybe not, if that is actually a good solution or a good approach to providing food in developing countries like my own Uganda. So as you can see from the background there, I talk about the dynamic world where we have pressures from a high population, and there's lots of urbanization, encroachment on natural resources, and then as a result, there's land use alteration. And Uganda in particular has a rapidly growing population, and it depends mainly on rain-fed agriculture. Now, the scope of this study was majorly looking at both the national scales and the regional scales. Uganda, for your information, has 4 regions. It's the northern, the eastern region, then the eastern and the western region. These are geographical regions, but it's unique that each one of them has almost different vulnerabilities to climate. And that's why it was interesting for us to actually look at the regional scales vis-a-vis the national scale, because there's a tendency for the national for the national scale to overlook certain differences that could happen regionally. And we employed mostly remote sensing data. That's climate data, looking at precipitation, temperature, evapotranspiration, and drought indices. And then our main element that we're using for comparison was the net primary productivity, which is also an indicator of the amount of food that crops form within them as a result of photosynthesis. Now, we were looking to examine the impacts of the climate extremes and land use changes on food production. And then we wanted to validate that by looking at the performance of the 10 major crops in Uganda. And when we move to the methods, I already mentioned, sorry, we can already go to the methods. I already mentioned that we employed remote sensing data, and we were using the results from the data that we had processed to see if there's a correlation or, let's say, an impact of climate extremes on the food production. And I'll quickly move to the next slide where most of the results are presented. Yes, so in the results here, allow me to draw your attention to the graphs below, the two graphs below. If you look at, for example, the mean annual variations of precipitation and the mean annual variations of the net primary productivity, you see that there's quite a similarity, especially for the years where the precipitation drops. So if you look at, for example, 2005 and then 2008, 2009, and also look at 2012, you realize that the pattern is almost the same. And now when you come up to the graph that talks about, that indicates the drought indices, you also see, I mean, it's a bit too small, but you can see from the graphs that for particular years, especially just take a look at 2009, you will see that where there's a variation, there's a corresponding variation in net primary productivity. That means that as we are looking to expand land to grow more food, this food production is actually vulnerable to climate extremes. And if you look in the tables here where you see the land cover changes between 2001 and 2017, which were our study periods, you can see that, for example, urban lands and farmlands are increasing across the country and across the 4 regions. And when you look at the percentage losses or the land covers that changed drastically for losses, you find that it's mostly the forests and the wetlands. So in summary, that tells you that most people are encroaching on forests to expand land for agriculture, and likewise the wetlands also are being encroached on to expand land for agriculture. But then one wonders if that is actually viable, because as you can see in the graphs below, wherever there is like a fluctuation, there is a corresponding fluctuation in the net primary productivity. And when we go to the next slide, sorry. Yes, so when we move to the next slide, unfortunately it's a poster presentation, so I didn't have the opportunity to have everything together. But in our findings, we found that most of the crop production in Uganda resonated to increment in area harvested. That means that as I increased land, then the food production also increased. But then there was a special and very interesting case for certain crops like cassava, plantain, and coffee, whereby the area harvested, the increase in area harvested did not necessarily generate increase in agricultural production for these crops. So if you can see the first graph, for example, for cassava, you can see that area harvested was increasing post 2006. But if you look at the crop production, it increased and then it remained constant. And if you look at the graph for the yield, you see that there's a correlation between the yield and the production, unlike the correlation between area harvested and the crop production. Then it's the same for the plantain and the coffee grain. So in summary, we found that there's an opportunity for Uganda to actually explore increasing the yield of certain crops instead of necessarily increasing the land, because we could clearly see that increasing the land offers only a temporary solution, but in the face of climate change, it is a step backward. So, and I would just quickly refer to the research of the previous presenter, that's Saher, as it clearly illustrated that there's a potential to increase water use efficiency for the different countries. I mean, Uganda is just very close to these countries, but you can clearly see that from complementary research, it doesn't make so much sense to increase land, the area harvested, while the crops are vulnerable to climate change. So thank you for listening. I invite any questions and discussions to this.
Okay, thank you, Lillian, for your also very interesting presentation, and also thanks for keeping it in a good time. I think we started a bit later, so we have time for a question or two. As long as everybody's typing, hopefully. I have a short question at the beginning. Because I'm not so familiar with the farming systems in Uganda, what would you think, or what would you suggest are the main measures to increase the yields of the main crops?
So, like I said earlier, the different regions. So there's not one uniform measure that could work for the whole country, but because these regions are unique in their soils, in their climate, in the way of life, people have to adapt to different measures. For example, in the western region that's found to be very fertile, people maybe have to adapt more to micro irrigation, or let's say generally augmenting rain-fed agriculture through irrigation. And it would be the same for the northern region, which is also dry, because we saw in the other slide that droughts have a very negative impact on crop production, and resultantly the yield. So if there is an irrigation measure, I think it would do very well to augment the rain-fed agriculture, because we receive a lot of rain in Uganda, but the minute the rain is not there because of climate change, then it's a disaster, you know? So I don't know if that answers your question, Heinrich.
Sure. Yes, it does. You already mentioned the droughts, but we have a question from Saher. And he asked if you found whether climate extremes influence the crop production regime, and maybe there's something else than droughts that might also influence it, if you know something about that.
Okay, so sorry. Unfortunately, for this particular research, we're not able to expound more on the crop production regime because of the limited time that we had, but maybe that's a good thing that we could think about in expanding the research. You're welcome to work with us. You know, we've shared a professor, so it's nice. We can put some efforts together and we could explore this in Uganda, also in the Eastern region in general. Thank you.
Yes, I have one more question before I have a comment from Mirja that fits perfectly together with your presentation and with the whole overall session as a conclusion. So first, one question from Ajay Singh. How can you increase land area for crop production?
Okay, so again, I refer to the research because you see that we have agricultural land that's originally there, but then we also have other land uses. That's why I was referring to the land use alterations in the third slide of my presentation, where you could see that, for example, the wetlands, what used to be a wetland, because people are looking to increase land, they reclaim the wetland and then they grow food in the wetland. What used to be a forest, you've probably heard of the deforestation stories in Africa and in countries like Uganda. What used to be a forest or a central forest reserve is cut down to create land for agricultural production. But again, the key question is it worthwhile? Does increasing the land from converting other land uses actually guarantee that there's going to be food security from increased food production. So maybe Singh, I don't know if I answer your question correctly or you have a follow-up.
If there is a follow-up, we have short time. I think, in my opinion, I think you did answer it well. Then, yes, I have one more compliment and also a comment from Mirja, which I would sign and repeat it immediately. So first, interesting presentation. And yeah, Mirja likes your final conclusion that it makes not so much sense to increase the land. But, sorry, we have one more question. I think we have this one more question, finalize it, and then we make the conclusion. And yes, so the question is if using wetlands or forest lands for crop production will lead to environmental degradation.
I'm sorry?
Will the use of wetland and forest for crop production lead to environmental degradation?
Definitely, because when you look at the forest and the wetlands in the wider sense of them being key catchment, water catchment areas, first of all, you look at draining a wetland, and then you have issues of flooding. That's already an impact of environmental degradation. When you look at the forest being cut down, then you have to talk about the carbon sinks that you're losing, and then the ultimate impact, which is generally climate change as a result of these human influences. So yes, I don't know if this is a question or this is an addition, but I know and I believe so much that using the wetlands and the forest for land, for crop production, leads to environmental degradation. And that's what we're actually saying, that instead of increasing the land, look into increasing the yield by, for example, augmenting rain-fed agriculture. Yeah.
Yes, okay, so here we come exactly to the statement that Mirja quoted. That's actually exactly the topic of our session. And that fits, I think, very well to to those overall framework. So yes, don't increase the land area, and if the crops are vulnerable to climate change, make the existing systems more resilient, more water use efficient as well, and avoid food losses, implement integrated pest control, may have a better soil fertility management, water use efficiency already mentioned. So more resilient systems, more water use efficient systems help much more than expanding the area. I would like to say thanks again to all the wonderful presentations we had. I enjoyed every single one, and I'm very happy that you all made it and put all the efforts. Also, thanks to the whole audience for the active participation, all the questions. Yes, I think we could provide a space to discuss on recent findings to this common goal. And yeah, hope to see you in the next days at the WSCC. And if you have anything else, just contact us, contact Mirja, contact my colleague Daniela Gomez or me here via the conference tool, or check out the Food Security Center at www.foodsecurity.de. There you also find all our contact details if you have any question, anything in the future. So take care, stay healthy and safe, and see you tomorrow.